Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So, before this video starts, I may or may not be doing Monster Hunter Wilds content, but it may be streams here on YouTube. Haven't completely decided as of recording this, but man, the game is so much fun. Anyway, not here for that today. Still doing all sorts of stuff on Destiny and still making content. And I wanted to go ahead and jump into some of the more interesting bits and pieces of lore that we've gotten this episode. So today we're doing some stuff that is related to the Cabal who were on the Dreadnought. With all that being said, what I'm about to talk about today is not guaranteed to actually be verifiable. It is something where I'm speculating about the fate of a survivor, but I wanted to put the idea out there up front that what I'm about to talk to you about doesn't really have a degree of certainty behind it. To put it really simply, I think there is a chance that a single Skyburner is still alive on the Dreadnought. Mad, I know, but the lore from Heresy leaves just enough room and ambiguity to allow for this possibility. So today, we're going to talk about Olgurn, the Erismorn equivalent of the Cabal, a survivor who was either the last of the Skyburners, or who has persisted on the ship within its tunnels for about a decade. He is either the last to have made any records and therefore the last to die, or he is the sole survivor of a failed campaign that the Cabal Empire never technically called off. So, first things first, for those who are completely uninitiated, who the hell are the Skyburners and why are they on the Dreadnought? You might have noticed the Cabal corpses that are just strewn about all over the place. Typically in the mausoleum, sometimes within the Hall of Souls. A lot of the time though, they'll be at the threshold, the just sort of entrance area that is around the outside. This is no coincidence, because the Skyburners were a legion of Cabal from back in Destiny 1 that tried to invade the Dreadnought, and, well, you can tell about how successfully that went. The timeline goes something like this. Way back in the Collapse or Dark Ages, the Cabal made their way to Sol. There were several scout legions that worked their way here, including the Sand Eaters, Dust Giants, Siege Dancers, Ice Reapers, which were a special legion of Scion Flayers, the Blind Legion, and last but not least, the Skyburners. Remember that whenever a Cabal legion is sent off to war, they are technically exiled from the Empire until they return home victorious. They return home victorious or they don't return at all. The Skyburners in particular were a powerhouse of that Cabal Scout Legion force. They took up residence on the Martian moon of Phobos and established a massive Cabal fleet base there. The Scions of the Ice Reapers reportedly brought Phobos low into Mars's orbit without crashing the moon into the planet's surface, and that allowed the fleet base on Phobos to basically act as this massive resupply hub, something that improved the logistics of every single Scout Legion because, well, the entirety of their infrastructure was just really close by. This was all something that seemingly was under the purview of the Skyburners Legion. They were the ones who were responsible for this fleet base after all. And ultimately, this is where they used their forces to strike out from Phobos and try and take Mars. And the only reason they were stopped was ultimately the Virgo Prohibition, a unique group of Vex that were specific to Mars itself, and in particular were trying to guard the Valley of the Kings and the gateway into the Black Garden there. However, from here, the Cabal just kind of ended up getting to a standstill. They did have the elite Blind Legion, which would go in and clear lower Vex constructs within Mars's surface, but ultimately they didn't make much progress, and so they remained on Mars for a very long time. And then Oryx arrived, and the start of the Taken War happened. He won the Battle of Saturn in a most definitive fashion, and after having defeated the Awoken, Oryx's forces spread out into the system and started terrorizing everyone, from the Elixni of the various fallen houses, to the Vex of the Vault of Glass, to, of course, the Cabal. But the Cabal were some of the worst hit, and we see records of this based on what happened to their mining operations. Take a listen to this excerpt from The Taken King. It talks about the percentages of each legion that got hit.
Cabal mining sites across Mars and Phobos have been hit. Losses to Blind Legion, 35%. Losses to Sand Eaters, 58%. Dust Giants, 39%. What is this?
So yeah, the Cabal were pretty devastated and the Scout Legions were in a huge amount of trouble when Oryx came along. With the Cabal legions being hit this hard, there was a decision that had to be made, and it was one Primus Taon of the Skyburners who made that decision. He ordered what was probably the most desperate but Cabal-coded gambit one can imagine. He ordered the ships under his command to engage the Dreadnought directly. The results or size of this deployment are not well known, but the odds were never in the Cabal's favor. And I think that Taon kind of knew that because of the strategy that he employed. It doesn't matter how many ships he had at his disposal though, the end result was the same. The core vessel under his command, the Dantalian Exodus 6, ended up crashing into the side of the Dreadnought, perforating its hull and creating a landing zone for the Skyburners Legion. And again, I don't think that this was an accident. I think this was very deliberate. The way that the Primus acts and talked about it in the Grimoire seems to indicate that this might have been the case. The Skyburners would then find themselves running an unsuccessful ground war against the Taken King's own brood in the Dreadnought. The blood of Oryx would push them back really hard, and that was before they even encountered the power of Oryx himself. Regardless of whatever Cabal bluster might have allowed them to believe, there was only ever going to be one way that this ground war ended, and it started about as badly as it could have. It was ill-fated because the majority of the Cabal command staff from the Skyburners Legion ended up being either taken or killed. This included the officer, identified only as Vroon, from the outbound signal mission, the two Cabal shield or bond brothers, the Valuses known as Valus Talern and Valus Ma'al, and of course, Primus Taon himself. The Cabal presence on the Dreadnought lasted in forceful numbers for at least 2 years, but it's unclear what happened to them past that point. After the return of the Red Legion, one would assume that most of them might have been picked up by Dominus Gaul's forces, but there isn't actually any confirmation of that, and I even looked into different bits and pieces of lore. Even the Skyburner's Oath exotic doesn't really cover the idea that Gaul's forces came along and actually picked them up. It talks about the potential for them to go ahead and see Gaul finish this war that's going on in Sol, but it never confirms that they reunited their forces. And here's the thing. I think that you can couple this notion that there is no confirmation of the Skyburners ever being retrieved with Gaul's knowledge of the dangers that the Hive generally posed. I think it's really unclear if any vessels were even sent to investigate the area where the Skyburners sent their last transmission. A transmission, by the way, which actually brought Gaul to the system. He might have written off the Skyburners as a lost cause and a lost force. After all, Guardians felt safe gathering on Titan in the shadow of the Dreadnought itself. No Cabal made their way there. It just kind of goes to show, Gaul was not messing around with the Hive. He understood the danger there, and I don't think he wanted to bring any of his forces anywhere close to it until he had supposedly managed to take the light. This is what leads me to that belief that the Cabal aboard the Dreadnought might have been abandoned for as long as they have been. If so, their food stocks, munitions, and of course their troop numbers would have been grinded down over time by the steady rate and flow of attrition that inevitably was going to happen when they landed on the Dreadnought, of all things. This would have happened over a long period of time, and it should be clarified, it's not unheard of for Cabal forces to last a long time without resupply. After all, the remnants of the Red Legion across the system have been doing this in one way or another for longer than we can fathom. But it's also really clear from how many Skyburner bodies are scattered across the Nether now that this was a limited force facing off against a Hive brood in their own ship. There was no way they could hold out forever. And yet, Psychopomp, the new Area Denal frame grenade launcher from the Nether, kind of gives us the possibility of a strange glimmer of hope. It follows the story of a Cabal soldier named Olgern, who, up until this point, has never been mentioned in the lore at all. He is a new character. He was a Skyburner that survived an undetermined amount of time on the Dreadnought, up until the point that he appears to be the final soldier, potentially of the entire Legion. Now, to be really clear, like I was at the very beginning, there is no confirmation that this lone soldier still lives, but I think I'm willing to entertain the possibility, simply because stories like this do happen. I mean, literally, Eris has done this kind of stuff. But Bungie also seldom makes a lore tab on someone specific like this without a reason. They like to propagate these ideas of future storylines to see if the community bites, and when they do occasionally bite, well, maybe more stuff about that character gets written. It's something that you see all over the place. I mean, take a look at all the Trials of Osiris weapons. The idea of the fire teams and the guardians that you see within the Trials weapons, all of that has been propagated for years, and it continues to be kind of built up with every single weapon that gets released, even if it's just built up through the occasional bit of flavor text nowadays. The Psychopomps lore tab might simply be to show a demonstration of the end of the Skyburners' presence, and that they really did fight down to the last man. But the thing is, nowhere in the lore tab does it actually say that Olgun died. So with that in mind, here's Olgun's story as is told in the Psychopomp lore tab. It's the Scions who go first. Miserable, weedy things. Can't take the pressure, one of them told Olgun before the end. The whole ship around them weighing them down, crushing the juice out of their brains. The rest of them last a little longer. Daughters and sons of Torobatl with their heads made of rock already. Olgun's grandma in the village wanted to die out in the sands, let the wind scrape away her ossified features. That's how they did it back home. The day he joined up with the Skyburners, their recruiter gave him his obol, and he learned something new. "That's your death," she said. "Put it in your pocket and never forget it. The other Skyburners will take it when it's your time. Now pick up your gun. That's your duty. Victory for the Empire, for the Emperor." Olgun had to do the rites for Big Grusk all by himself. Had to cut his mangled armor open with a torch to get to his obol. Now it's just him, crawling through tunnels with alien chitin bolted to his armor and worm spore smeared wherever he can reach, smelling like an acolyte. Last one alive means he's ranking officer. Means the Dreadnought's his responsibility. So Olgun puts on his stinking armor, and he crawls through tunnels, and he plants explosives, and he makes sure he's at the minimum safe distance before he hits the trigger. He's a Skyburner. He said the oath. He doesn't get to give up. And when the relief shows up, Olgun's gonna give them his report. And his obol. So, yeah, Olgun doesn't die in this lore tab. He's just in pretty dire straits by the end of it, being the only survivor from the Legion as best we can tell. From those that don't understand, by the way, there is something referenced constantly throughout this, which is the obol that they're talking about. And it's actually an artifact you can find in Destiny 1. The Skyburner's obol is a little bit like a coin. I don't think there's any confirmation of this, because they're supposedly more Roman-coded than Greek-coded. This does feel a little bit like it references a certain Greek tradition. In particular, the idea that you would lay coins across the eyes of the dead as payment to the ferryman of the underworld, a guy known as Charon. In this case, however, each obol is taken from the dead instead, perhaps to be handed to a commander upon the completion of a campaign as a means of numbering the dead or numbering those relieved from duty. Maybe it's a little bit less of a coin laid across the eyes of the dead and more of a dog tag. Makes you wonder just how many obols Olgun might have collected as part of those funerary rites over the years. If Olgun did survive, that makes him a valuable asset, however, particularly to Keitel, who is still intent on reclaiming the lost homeworld of the Cabal. Ever since the Hive took Torobatl, the Empress and her legions have been looking for all the intelligence they can muster. For the Cabal, Olgun might just be a source of that intelligence, almost a source that's akin to Eris. Granted, his time in the dark is nothing compared to hers, and his knowledge of the occult and of Hive magics will doubtless be inferior compared to hers, but I think there's a matter of perspective to also be considered. After all, Eris was once a Guardian, and whilst she is a survivor, Olgun is a Cabal. He only really knows how to survive and fight. He's had time, probably, to sharpen his metaphorical blades against the Hive for a long while, and has probably become an expert in fighting them if he still lives at all. And I can only imagine that Keitel will be all the more pleased to recover an asset like that if it's one that can teach her own troops how to better fight Xivu Arath's Hive on Torobatl's surface. There is, of course, no guarantee, as I've said multiple times through this video, that Olgun still lives. But I do have a little hope. After all, The flavor text of the psychopomp does read, "We'll bring you home." So who knows? Maybe Olgern does still live. Maybe he is crawling through the disgusting, fetid tunnels of the Dreadnought. Maybe his armor is caked in yet more worm spore and whatever the Hive leave behind. Maybe he will, however, be recovered. And if so, maybe he will live to see Tora battle once more. With all that being said, I hope you found the video interesting, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like, and also go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you starside.